Hi, everyone. Can you hear us? Hear me okay? Hi. Hi. So we are so excited to be here and to share with you some of the work that we've been doing with sustainability and philanthropy and open source communities. A little bit to just get a sense of like who's in the room and where you're coming from. Who here even contributes to open source on a regular basis? That's great. And who here, whether you do it or not, but who here thinks of open source contribution as an individual effort or something you might do with community? So who would kind of tend towards it's a solo thing that you do? Oh, interesting. And who thinks it's mostly like something you do with community? Well, that is really exciting because this talk is about creating a community for open source volunteer contribution. It's really about what community looks like and when we do it together for the public good. So a little bit of what the agenda is going to look like. I wanted to introduce Bloomberg and the Bloomberg Open Source Office to you all if you're not familiar with it, and kind of some of the principles that we use and that we follow as we build our work. I wanted to share a bit about how we see open source as a community and what that means, both when we work internally and then also partner with others. And then finally, not finally, but this is really kind of really a crux of a lot of what we want to talk about today. This is the Sustaining Open Source Initiative. This is a project that we did with Pandas and Focus for an extended mentorship program. And then finally, let's scale this. I mean, if we are all responsible for open source and its longevity and its health, and so how can we, as a collective, be responsible for it being healthy and moving forward? So a little bit about myself. I'm Melissa. I'm part of the Open Source Program Office at Bloomberg. My entire life has been about open source. I really believe that open source is sort of a fundamental piece to being able to create creative, innovative things in the business space and beyond. But I also think that open source is part of a fundamental good and is our digital infrastructure that we're all need to be taken care of. So a little bit about Bloomberg. We are an open source first company. That means that open source accelerates and is part of everything that we do. It is our business. It is ubiquitous and is in everything that we build and our services, whether internally or externally. It is critical. Our open source software development process is based on open source. It is our community, both internally and the communities that we bridge to, and it is the infrastructure that we build from. So really, and I think many organizations are kind of in this space, open source is unavoidable. So I think that we get to a really interesting question then, because the question is not whether to use open source, but rather how to create a culture of open source collaboration and innovation. So again, thinking from the perspective of Bloomberg, we are looking to what does our journey look like? Where are we moving as an organization? We're moving beyond just using. We're moving beyond consumption to really be good, authentic participants, contributors, and leaders in the open source space. So kind of four things that we have kind of structured and put together in order to be leaders in the open source space to help us be able to accelerate beyond kind of a framework of consumption is these four pillars. One is this, our support of open source foundations. We see foundations as incredibly important for the governance, for the everything from the fiscal hosting to the guidance that an open source project needs. And so we firmly support and have for many years our open source foundations. We also just recently started what's called in the industry the FOSS Contributor Fund. This is kind of a system where our employees vote on where the money should be donated to in terms of supporting open source projects financially. We've also recently started this employee giving program, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more here. And this is called Open Source Dollars for Your Hours. And what this is designed to do is see that open source contribution can sometimes be about a work contribution, but oftentimes it's a volunteer contribution. It's really to support a public infrastructure that we all share. And so seeing this as a volunteer contribution, we have structures that are set up that we can match that volunteer contribution to charitable donations. And then finally, what we'll be talking about in the kind of third section is this employee volunteering program. And so this is built on top of the open source dollars for your hours, where we bring teams together to be able to think about how to sustain open source as a community. So in summary, from the Bloomberg perspective, we see open source as a collective responsibility, where the shift is from simply using and consuming open source to really being an active agent and responsible for its longevity. So I wanted to kind of take a moment here to talk about this open source dollars for hours. This is this volunteer matching program where we are able to, again, match hours that people are doing for open source contribution with charitable donations. So first, employees are able to volunteer hours to an open source project that's important to them. With our partnership with corporate philanthropy, we're able to match those dollars. And then by combining both the time and the money, we see this as a more holistic way of thinking about sustaining open source as a public good. I wanted to give a call out here about what this kind of concept of dollars for hours looks like and why it matters, with a call out to a colleague in the audience, Stephanie Stadl. So Stephanie here for many years has done an incredible amount of volunteer work to support the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Over the course of many years, she's contributed over $50,000 for this foundation that really matters to her and her family. And she has traditionally done this through Meals on Wheels or Big Brothers, kind of a typical volunteer efforts that are within the cities that she works in. By combining this kind of volunteer effort into the open source space, we're able to have our engineers, our technical colleagues be able to use their skills and grow their skills in open source spaces that matter, and then still be able to contribute maybe back to that open source project or to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, however they see fit. So this is something that we started last year, this open source dollars for hours. And it was really interesting because a lot of this effort was thought people individually contributing to open source in their volunteer time, they will be able to contribute back to things that are meaningful to them. And somebody came up to me and was like, well, what if we did that as a community? What would it look like if we did this volunteer contribution together? And so this is where I pass it over to Dave to talk about what the power of bringing community into this framework means and what we created from it.
Thanks, Alyssa. So I want to talk about how open source is about people as much as it is about technology. But before that, I just want to mention a few things about myself. Hi, I'm Dave, and I'm a senior software engineer at Bloomberg. But to understand why all of this is important to me, I want to also share two other things. One is that I will always try to find time to give back to the community that I have learned from and grown so much in. And while doing that, I want to create an inclusive environment so we all can thrive in it. And one such community at Bloomberg is Bloomberg Women in Technology, or BWIT in short. And I want to share a small story from BWIT, and that will kind of summarize why community matters to me. And it will relate later on how community matters to open source. So at BWIT, we wanted to create a space for STEM mentors, engineers who wanted to introduce STEM to high school students or anyone who is interested in getting into STEM. We wanted to create a space for them to come together. Being part of that community, I've realized that when we work together towards a shared purpose, we have a sense of belonging. And yes, it is definitely an opportunity for personal growth and ways to find others, but I've also seen that when one of us require any help or support the community comes together to provide that support. So now when we look at open source as community of people, we see that uh, similar observation. And when diverse people from different background come together, we start seeing innovation and creativity coming in. We also see that there is trust building that leads to open communication, and we know for sustaining open source and open communication is important. Once all of this come together, we start seeing tools that have global social impact. I'll pass it on to Alyssa to talk about how at Bloomberg we are sustaining open source.
Thanks, Dave. So I wanted to introduce you to our Sustaining Open Source initiative. This is something that we have done twice with the Pandas community. And we see this as a framework. So hopefully other communities will be part of this, other companies will be part of this for helping us sustain open source together. So first, a little bit of like what the pilot criteria look like. What does it look like from like a business perspective in order to be able to partner with an organization, rather partner with an open source community to make something like this like sustainable? This is the most exciting part. We needed a legal entity. So we are a legal entity, and we need another legal entity in order to make an agreement and sign documents. And this is a critical piece that it sometimes doesn't seem as exciting, but it's requirement. We needed mentorship. We needed mentors that would be able to commit from internally from our organization, but we also needed mentors that were able and had the time and the space and the excitement to contribute from the project as well. We needed business value. We needed to, like, from the Bloomberg perspective, we needed to find a project that had that mattered to our company, our employees, on a broad scale. We needed community. Again, back to the mentorship, both internal community but an external community that we could like connect with and learn from. We needed shared values. This was not going to be a cookie cutter thing that was going to be like, finished in the first go. This is, we needed a community that we could actually learn from and grow with and help to build together. And then finally, we needed incentives that allowed us to be able to participate in a mentorship program over an extended period of time. And Pandas was and continues to be an excellent partner in this work. So a little bit about why Pandas and why Pandas has been a really successful partner in this initiative. First, Pandas is hosted by NumFocus, a legal entity that we could work with. This was really important, and again, as said before, a requirement. There was mentorship. We had mentors internal to our Bloomberg community, but even more importantly, there were mentors from the Pandas community that were able and willing to commit time and resources to work with us. There's business value. Pandas is an important project to Bloomberg. There may be it may not be important to other companies, but it was really important for all of the work that we do at Bloomberg. Community. Pandas has a community that we could learn and grow with, and we had a community that we could also bring to this partnership. There are shared values. Both NumFocus and Pandas care about diversity, sustainability, and mentorship, and so do we. And then finally, incentives. The matching of dollars to these volunteer efforts, something that we could do only with our corporate philanthropy partners, really made a difference in motivating our participants to be able to contribute over the course of the two cohorts. I'm going to pass it over to Dave to talk more about how we structured this work in order for it to work in reality.
Thanks, Alyssa. So first thing is open source is beyond boundaries. So we wanted to start with the global community outreach. What that means for Bloomberg is that we wanted to reach from APAC offices to ME offices throughout. And once we had a community with that much of diverse background, different offices, we wanted to have a space for them to come together, talk to mentors, talk to each other, share the ideas. And for that, we introduced work sessions. And fun fact, how do we figure out best time to host work sessions when we are across that many time zones? Yeah, I mean, we used pandas to figure that out. After the work sessions, as Alyssa said, that this was our second run. During the first run, we had realized that people come with different laptops, development setup, etc. So we wanted to have a streamlined process so they could kickstart their development. So we came up with like a quick checklist for setting up the development environment. And for the next thing is that yes, contribution is important, but we also wanted to empower participants to talk about their contribution to their peers so they could inspire others, and also to talk to their management so that they can showcase the impact that they have been having with this contribution. And that's why we introduced this part, which is contribution dialogue. And last but not least, we have been collecting feedback and iterating over the feedback to make this structure better. So now success stories. It's only success, so yes, we just talk about that. So first
That's
is
business talk.
first is the project success. There have been 100 plus global participants, and the reason I stress on global is because through this initiative, we have been able to work with engineers around the globe at Bloomberg offices. And in my day to day, I might not get to work with them, but this project made us all come together. And we had 40 plus pull requests created, and many of them were from women and underrepresented groups. There have been some personal impact as well. One of them is over here. Michael, one of the participants, shared that I have always wanted to do start contributing to open source, but never had that push to get me to it. And this initiative is the one that I needed. And this was a story from someone who wanted to get into open source contribution, but there has been similar personal impact on people who want to grow in the role of their open source contribution, like myself. I wanted from contribution to try to see if I can do more of mentorship and reviewing the code. And this has helped. And because we have personal impact, we see that people continue making contribution. We have seen that some of the participants are still making contribution even after the initiative series has ended for this year. And social impact, difficult to count what could be the social impact, but in numbers, 500 plus hours have been contributed. Going back to what Alyssa said, where you can convert the hours to contribution, employees can actually convert this to charitable donations. And participants actually voted pandas to receive a Bloomberg Force contribution fund. Now, this is the success story from our perspective. How does it look like from the perspective of a core maintainer? So I want to share this feedback that we received from Will, who has been a Pandas core maintainer and has been a valuable mentor of the Bloomberg Sustaining Open Source Initiative this year. I'll share a few points from this quote. So open source projects rely on large community of contributors, yet struggle to fulfill the needs of the community. And through the Bloomberg initiative, contributors connected directly to the core maintainers of Pandas, and it helped the community to identify contributions that they would want to work on. And for co-maintainers, it was an easy way to communicate at once to a large group of volunteers, again 100 plus global volunteers. And he also adds that I look forward to Bloomberg continuing this program with Pandas and other open source projects in the future. So what did we learn? First, it takes a global village to sustain the open source contribution. And when we have a community with diverse perspective coming together, it's easy to take leap of faith, whether it's to start the open source contribution or to grow into the role of open source contribution, and you want to take some more responsibilities. And the work sessions have taught us that when we have a space for people to come together and share ideas, they could inspire each other. And it's like planting seeds of ideas as the session progresses. And sometimes it does become tough in open source, and mentors have been a guiding light. Mentors have shown us the path of what we could do next. And I would pass it on to Alyssa to talk about how we can scale this.
Thanks, Dave. So this is our framework. We work with foundations. We give voice to our employees. We have this open source dollars for hours employee giving program, and we work with teams to do volunteering and collaborate towards sustaining open source. This is one of the ways that we are looking to move beyond consumption to really be authentic and good participants in open source communities. I'd really encourage you to reflect on what is your own framework, whether you're coming from the perspective of a project or a company. What does your framework look like in order to sustain open source and be work with others to make that happen? I really encourage you to be in dialogue with us. We're really excited to see how we can do this in other contexts and other spaces with other partners. So please get in touch. And we are hiring to forward this work as well as many of the other work that we're doing at the ASPO. So please feel free to learn more at this QR code or reach out to us at opensource@bloomberg.net. And then finally, a big thanks. None of this would have been possible without our mentors and the group of people that really come together to make this happen. So to list them all out, Aram Chong, who is our Bloomberg mentor, Eric Anderson, also a Bloomberg mentor, Leah Sillen, who is in the audience here, Executive Director of Gnome Focus, big thanks to her, Natalia Mokiva, Panda's mentor based in Germany, Patrick Hofler, who I don't know if he's here, but is in the conference and was also a Pandas mentor for the first cohort and really, really important. Stephanie Mullen, a Bloomberg mentor, and Will Aid, a Pandas mentor. All of them have really been able to make this a success, and we are forever grateful. Thank you.
You don't have to say like.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I do. Please, when you ask a question, say your name.
Hi, I'm Chuck. I'm one of the board members of the Python Software Foundation. So first of all, thank you, Bloomberg, for being our visionary sponsors. I want to ask, for open source, I know Bloomberg is supporting open source, so which type of support do you think is more valuable? Is it to hire an engineer to contribute directly, an experienced engineer to contribute directly to the project, or is it to educate and to nourish the community to get new and upcoming contributors to an open source project? So which one personally you think is more important?
Yeah, and I think to answer that, it probably would be from personal point of view, because I think first of all, I think all of those are important, and I think that companies should be building the capacity to do all that, no matter whether a big company or a small company. I think that from my point of view, I think it's really important to first of all hear what a project needs. I mean, I don't want to their projects are like little kids. There are so many different types, So I think understanding what a project needs in order to be healthy. Maybe it is money, and a check would make a big difference for their work. But maybe it is a bigger pipeline of contributors. And so that's another reason why I think working with foundations and projects that are hosted by foundations, they can be help to, on a high level, articulate what the needs are. And then for us as organizations to build projects, again, whether that is funding something internally or externally, or funding an initiative to address those needs. I'm really excited about opportunities, though, for not just one person to be an amazing contributor to a project, but really where you have depth of and organizational depth, where as a community of engineers, like within an organization, that we are good contributors to open source projects and help to maintain that work. So.
Hi, I'm Marie. My question is a bit like a devil advocate, but why should a company spend time and money on open source, especially if the competitors are doing it, so it's maintained, but not by them? How could you convince such company?
Sorry, say the question again. Is it how to convince your company to do open source?
Yeah, because if it's not maintained well, it's obvious, but if it's maintained by a competitor, then it's the best because the competitor spends money on it and you don't, but you just benefit from it.
Well, this is fun. I mean, this is a fun drinking game, FYI. But that's off the record, right? So, I mean, why would you want your competitor to be in control of a project that you rely on roadmap? I mean, that doesn't sound very smart business sense. So they get to decide what features go into a project that you rely on. So it seems like if you want to control your own destiny, it makes sense to be active contributors and in an open source project that you rely on.
I just want to add something from engineering point of view. Is like if I'm an engineer and I just know the code base better, I can use it better. It's just it's personally how I feel about it. So I also feel that even if someone per se else is maintaining, I still would want to be part of that community, learn from it. And pandas have like point an example. Pandas have like community where there's always great discussion and it helps to, and the work will benefit from it. So that's from an engineering point of view.
Hi, I'm Maria for a change. And I have two questions in place of one, if I may. So the first one is, were your engineers working on the open source in their work time or in their free time? That's one thing. And another thing is, do you have any blog post or some case study that you could share? Because we are actually doing something very similar, and I think we could have a great discussion together also about this.
So great questions, both of them. So we have a number of engineers within Bloomberg that contribute to open source as part of their work priorities, and there are Pandas contributors that are that's part of their work. This kind of sits in a different space. Like this was clearly volunteer contribution. So this was something that didn't have anything to do with your work, one's work rather, and was understood with the management, like the person's manager, that this was not supposed to forward any of the things that they were responsible for in their work context. And that distinction is really important. It's important for us to be able to match those hours from a philanthropy point of view. So it's really important that in the conversation of open source, I think there's this like gray area of like what is work, what is volunteer, and there's a lot that kind of fits in between. And so the self-attestation of engineers to be like, this is my volunteer open source contribution, provides a little bit of clarity and space for our engineers to be able to like just see this as contribution and not work. In terms of blog posts, no, but we really want to have a blog post and announce this because part of what we want to learn from others who are doing similar work and also think about what this could look like scaled with other communities, like open source communities, other companies. So if you are interested in thinking of doing something similar, please come find me. We can talk. Did you want to add anything?
I think
Nothing from an engineering perspective.
Hi, so my name is Mark. Thanks for a great talk. and an inspiring project. And the devil's advocate is in this corner, so I'll also be that. My question is really, what's the main benefit of this initiative to the Pandas project? Let me try to explain. When I look at your numbers, it's 500 hours from 40 contributors. So if we break that down, that's around 10 hours per contributor, and probably a lot of these people are like new contributors. So it's also, you can say, an effort on the project actually to support all these new people. Can we see that Pandas is faster, that there's better documentation, or is it more about like bringing new contributors in, or what's the major benefits of this initiative?
Great question. Do you want to? Go ahead. You sure? Okay. First of all, I really don't want to speak for the Pandas project, so I can only speak from my point of view. The goal of the initiative is not for people to stop contributing at the end of this 10-week period, that's the structure, but really to continue to be contributing past that time. And so that's the path that we are trying to design for. And we have seen already, like the series just ended the end of September. And so we have seen people already signing up to do open source volunteer contribution to Pandas ongoing, regardless of this initiative. And so hopefully that is seen as a success from both the Bloomberg open source perspective, but also the Pandas perspective, is that we have new committed contributors that are not just like a flash in the pants, that was like a cool, event you guys did, but really like sustained engagement. And we tried to design it with that in mind, because they're like hackathons, as we all know, can be really powerful, like ways to bring people together, but they can also be just a weekend, And so we wanted to design, like part of the reason why there are 10 weeks is to try to build this type of patience, even of like you being part of a community takes time. It's understanding a code base takes time. Building those relationships takes time, and building that trust, and that all of that is work that like you can do with each other, and you can do with mentorship, and you can do supported by your company. I can probably guarantee that Pandas is not faster from any of those contributions, but I do hope that the pipeline of Pandas maintainers has increased, and not only that, has increased with a wider breadth of types of people as well. So
That's it. Thank you very much. And if you have any further questions, you can catch them up on the hallways.